Good morning. Oh.
Just want a show of hands. How many of you in your lives, personal or professional, have felt you between a rock and a hard place, ever? Have you ever? Show me your hands. So following Dr. Hrabowski and preceding lunch is the same thing.
All right, good morning, everyone. All right, that's a little bit better. The lights are very bright, but I'm going to try to look into your faces. I am so thrilled to be with you all here today. We know Alan and I are right here before lunch, but we hope to have a really intriguing conversation with you about high-impact tutoring. Raise your hand if high-impact tutoring is something that your district is currently doing right now. Okay, I see some hands, not all hands though. Again, I am Dr. Allison Harris-Welcher. I am with Chiefs for Change. And today, Alan and I are just gonna talk a little bit, not only about high impact tutoring and the impact that it can have, but really what is the return on investment, right? There are ESSER dollars that are going away. It's a harsh reality. And so we have to really think about where are we investing those funds to have the biggest impact. And so we know that high impact tutoring has had real efficacy. It has changed outcomes for students, both in math and literacy. But now we've got some hard decisions to make. What programs do we keep? Which ones do we dismantle? And so I want to start our discussion just today thinking a little bit about, what opportunities look like for students when we really open the door for them. And I want to start with my own personal reflection on my educational journey. And so when I was in middle school, my grandmother chose to go back to college. She was about 50 years old, and she wanted to become a teacher. Now imagine a 50-year-old woman going to college. She had to do all the regular general education classes. And at that time, I knew education was important, but I didn't really understand why and what education could do for me. And so my grandmother did end up graduating and becoming an elementary school teacher. And from that experience alone, I began to see the way in which education could open up doors. And for me, it opened up many of doors, allowing me, I may say something a little controversial here, but going to some private schools in terms of Spelman College, Stanford, and Harvard, and really creating an opportunity for me as a little black girl from Kernersville, North Carolina, to do some things that no one had ever done before. So when I think about the work that I've done as a teacher or a principal and a school leader, it's about creating those same opportunities for students. And so now I serve at Chiefs for Change as a senior director, supporting district leaders and state education chiefs to help have an impact for their students. And so with Chiefs for Change, we have been working with a number of districts on academic return on investment, AROI. Raise your hand if you're familiar with that term at all. See a few folks? Excellent. ROI for sure, but academic return on investment. So we have the opportunity to partner with Indianapolis Public Schools, Superintendent Dr. Alicia Johnson and her team to look at a number of initiatives that they invested in with their ESSER dollars and to think about how are these programs impacting students. And what they found through this process of the academic return on investment framework is, yes, there were some programs that were impacting students, but there were some that were really blowing it out the water and not only accelerating student learning, but the cost of that impact was less per student, right? Dollars are limited, human resources are limited. How do we ensure that we are getting the biggest bang for our buck? And so through that work, Dr. Johnson and her team were able to make some hard decisions. They were able to sunset some of those programs where their ESSER dollars were not going as far as they wanted them to go, but they were able to make some investments on the programs that they wanted to continue. Now, the work that we've done at Chiefs for Change with Indianapolis Public Schools, we've now extended that to Buford schools in South Carolina with Frank Rodriguez, who is also a Chiefs for Change member. And we've now created a community of practice where we are helping 10 systems across the nation to understand how to go through this framework before you launch into initiatives to think about what is the academic return on investment. We no longer have the luxury of just doing programs, right? We no longer have the luxury of just adding in supports and not knowing if they're really going to change outcomes for students. They have to have an impact. And so I want to invite Alan to share just a little bit about a strategy that we know high impact tutoring has that academic return on investment, and hear more about the work that you're doing in the field.
Thanks, Allison. It's great to be here. Can those of you in the back hear me? If you can, raise your hand. Super. So I'm Alan Safran, CEO and co-founder of Saga Education, which is the nation's nonprofit leader in helping states and districts get tutoring right. By that statement, you can imply that there's a lot of tutoring that's done wrong. I feel like I'm in a position to be able to say it because 20 years ago, I was one of the 2 people who co-designed the first ever in a US public school high-dosage tutoring intervention in a high school in Boston. And one of the students in that school, I was the executive director of this charter high school called Match. One of the students in that class was named A.J. Gutierrez. First in his family to go to college, got a Posse scholarship after high school, studied philosophy, came back from college, and with me, started this nonprofit called Saga. So every educator in the room knows how wonderful it is when one of your students comes back. I've known him since he was 14, he's 35 now, father, has 3 dogs, as well as a daughter, got a business degree, and is the most wonderful ambassador for the work that we do, because he not only was a co-founder, but he received the work when he was a 14-year-old. So you could call me one of the OGs of high-dosage tutoring. I helped coin the phrase high-dosage tutoring, but I don't use it any longer. You might want to ask, what do I use? High-impact tutoring, because high dosage is an input. And to Allison's point, you want to measure results, and so high impact is what you want to look for when you put in place a tutoring program. And so for 20 years I've been at this. A lot of people have been paying attention to tutoring since COVID, as the research suggested it would be the best bang for the buck, the best ROI on accelerating student learning. I've been at it 20 years, and I've seen it in many different environments, not just in the US, but we've been consulting in the Netherlands for 6 years, and they now have better results than we do in the US. So it's something that, if done right, can be terrific. And where's my Prince George's County folks? Prince George's?
Right.
I know you're there. Prince George's, talking to you. So you talked about reinventing schools, reimagining schools, and we think that tutoring should be built into the school day as part of the fabric of what kids receive in this country, just as part of their diet. And many schools have tried it now. Many schools are worried with the ESSER cliff they have to cut it back or end it. They don't. We're about to publish a blog on the EdTrust blog that gives 6 different ways to replace the lost federal ESSER funds with 4 new streams of federal funding that states and districts, I talk to commissioners and district leaders all the time, have not heard of, but they're there. There's also all the usual titles, Title I being the most legitimate, but you've got to repurpose what you spend it on now. And the biggest picture, and the point I want to make to Allison's point, is the ROI. So the evidence shows, and all the evidence on tutoring has led back to the work that we did since 20 years ago. The evidence shows that kids can gain up to 2.5 years of extra learning in 1 year of tutoring. So if kids are 5 years behind, Dr. Hrabowski would be pleased with this, it would take 2 years of 2.5 years per year to catch up, right? So it's possible to catch kids up. It's not too late, even at 9th grade, and I say especially at 9th grade. Because kids at 9th grade are at the greatest risk of dropping out, and if they drop out, their life trajectory changes dramatically, their economic mobility prospects diminish, so much diminishes in their life. We've got to fight tooth and nail for every kid in every grade, but I say at 9th grade, when they've just started a new school, when it's intimidating, the stakes are higher, that's where you want to support, provide the greatest expectations for kids and the greatest level of support for kids. And that's the work that we've been doing. We've been focused on 9th grade math for 20 years and have gotten these 2.5 years of results. Standard deviation of 0.26 for the geeks among us in the room, which is really closing half the black-white opportunity gap in 1 year. So the evidence is that if you hold on to kids at 9th grade and they persist to grade 12, they've gotten what you wanted in pre-K-12, which is to get a graduation certificate that has them ready and able to take on whatever's next. But if you lose those kids, not only is that bad educationally and morally, let's stipulate that, but the per pupil dollars that you will lose in the next 3 years, on average in this country, is about $15,000 a year. So you lose $45,000. You need an insurance policy at grade 9, and it costs between $500 and $1,000 per pupil. So you take that out of Title I funds or these new sources that we're happy to talk about. And you'd invest that and you get a 4x return rate. Kids who pass Algebra 1 at the end of grade 9 graduate 4 times the rate of kids who fail it. So if you've got a 4x graduation effect, you would want to invest. ROI again, AROI. Invest at grade 9, the grade where most kids drop out. They drop out for academic failure. The #1 class they fail is Algebra 1. Invest there with the right, effective strategy, which is high-impact tutoring. As Dr. Hrabowski said, you want to get to the level of specificity of what kids know and do. Teachers, class of 25, it's so hard to get to specificity for kids, but you build tutoring as a complement to the teacher during the day. You get that specific information. The tutor builds a relationship, the word we love to use, in addition to the word love. You know, tutors fall in love with their kids and want to do everything they can for them. But you get specificity about what that student can and can't do, and you address that in the context of a safe, quiet, personalized tutorial. That's the major point I wanted to make. Allison.
Yeah. We'd love to hear any questions that you all have, hear any of the impact that you're seeing with high impact tutoring. Alan and I are here to answer any of the questions or just reflections on what you've heard from us today.
Do you hear the lunch bell ringing? Is that
I
right?
do. But I have excellent wait time. I was a high school English teacher, so.
My dad was a high school teacher. I have excellent wait time. My mom was a second grade teacher, so in that sense, I don't have excellent wait time.
As folks are thinking about some questions, one of the things we have learned in doing the academic return on investment work with our districts is that we find that it actually allows some great tools to communicate why certain programs and initiatives are sunsetting. One of the things you might realize in your systems is that people are very tied to programs, right? There's a very strong feeling to certain programs, whether it be the role or just tradition or history that is tied to that. And at the end of the day, we have to be very honest with ourselves about, are we doing this because we've always done it, or are we doing this because it's having the impact that we want it to have? And so what we found with Indianapolis Public Schools, who did decide to sunset several of their programs that just did not show the return on investment, is that they were able to use that as a communication tool to various stakeholders, including the vendor, right? To say, hey, this is not the impact that we intended this to have. So this is no longer going to work for our district and for our students. Now, Alan, we talked a little bit about before just the influence of academic return on investment on contracts and what that might look like. Do you have any perspective on that?
Sure, this is a concept called outcomes-based contracting, which should take root in schools, hasn't done much, a little bit happening. You negotiate with a vendor and say, look, I'll pay you X dollars if you get expected results. I'll pay you X minus dollars. If you don't, I'll pay you X plus if you get something beyond expectations. It's a very interesting thing. The Southern Leadership Conference has got a lot of insights on this, and they'd be happy to help you with that. I know we have 30 seconds left. On the point of ROI, I also think politically you've got to think, as you're a school leader or official, you've got to reach two kinds of audiences these days. Those who want to hear the heart, the stories, the anecdotes, and those who need the numbers. Show me the numbers. And on tutoring, at least, it's got both. You've got kids who feel connected to school in a sense of belonging. You've got teachers who say, I didn't have tutoring last year in my class, I do now. I can't see a world without it. And you've got people who say, look, the return on investment of ensuring high school graduation is so significant, we need to find a way to keep this good thing going. And we appreciate our time with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.